Boker Tov, today's Daf is Daf Hayomi in קידושין, as we learned for Shlema for Elazar ben Ruma and Yosef Shmuel ben Chaim Michal. We're at the second line on the page, the end of the second line on Daf Hayomi. So Sabin and Zunya, the elders of the Zunya, lost the period of Chisda, didn't come to Rav Chisda's Shiur. They didn't come one day. Amalei Rav Hamnuna. So he told Rav Hamnuna, why didn't they come? Zil Saninu, go put them in Chayrim. In other words, tell him Rashi is the lashon that Lahazgir Atzman, Lahazgir Liyashav advice, they should stay home. In other words, sort of like what do they call that? When you have to stay home, they don't let you out. No, your house arrest, like house arrest, like stay, like it's a sort of a chayrim. Put them in, tell them to stay home. Azol, he went Amar Lahu. So this Rav Hamnuna said to these rabbis, to these elders, my time Allah on the pirkei, why didn't you come to the Shiur? Amalei, Amayne, why should we come? We ask him questions and he's not able to decide them for us. So why should we come? Amar Lahu, have you asked me anything and I haven't answered you? So ask me your questions. They asked him this question. Yesterday we talked about the 24 Rosh Eivarim. We'll see in today's stuff. I made a mistake yesterday. I said, we have Shem V'ayin, if you knock out the tooth or the eye of the Eved, plus 20 more. It's not 20 more, it's actually 24 more. The other 24 learned out, we said from a Ma'atzad. So it's 2 plus 24. So he said that, what about, and what's the characteristics of the other 24? It's just like Shem V'ayin or something which are exposed and they don't grow back. It's the same thing. These other like toes don't grow back, etc. Nipples or ears or nose, they don't grow back. So what about this question? What about something which exposed, for example, if his master castrated him? Knocking out a tooth and eye, we see, right? Knock out a tooth and eye, knock off a toe or a tip of an ear or a nose, something like that. Anything which is a projecting limb. What about castrating him? If you remove somebody's testicles, so they're sort of visible, they're sort of not, right? They're in a sack, but it's pretty obvious if they're missing. So that's the question. If his master castrated him, what's the halacha there? Is it considered something exposed? Oh, low, or it's not. So they asked him this question. These elders asked for this question. He didn't know the answer. So Amalei said, Mashim, what's your name? Amalu, Hamnuna. Amalei, lo Hamnuna, you're not Hamnuna, Ella Karnuna. Like Rashi said, you sit in a corner. You haven't been learning too much. You're like a dunce, sitting in a corner. You don't know the answer either. Tosa says that Karnuna is like a cold fish. You're not a warm fish, but you're like a cold fish. Anyway, they ridiculed him. They didn't go to Rav Chisda's Shiur and they didn't go to Rav Hamnuna's Shiur. Also, like coming to Rav Chisda, they came for Rav Chisda. He came back for Rav Chisda and now reported back that they raised a question he couldn't answer. Amalei, he says, you're asking me this question. They didn't. So why didn't they ask Rav Chisda this question? Apparently, I guess they didn't pose it to him. They posed it to Rav Hamnuna. So Rav Hamnuna said to Rav Chisda, they stumped me. So Amalei, Rav Chisda says, they asked you b'feirush Mishnah. What's the problem? Tonight we learned Esther Ma'arba Rashi Bar, the Mishnah that we mentioned yesterday from the Gom, the 24 projecting limbs or the tips of limbs, Sheba Adam, all these, the Mishnah and the Gom talks about all the various plagues, saras, etc., and all kinds of risings and white hair and yellow hair, etc. One of them is raw flesh, something that's like growing back, raw flesh that after a wound it grows back. That's also a kind of a tumah. So he says all these, and I'm talking shemichya. Why? Because if they're at the tips, the Kohen can't see. The Kohen has to be able to. You need a Kohen who's able to decide whether it's tummy or not, and he has to be able to see the whole thing with its sides on it. And these are on tips. All these things, whether it's the toe, the tips of the toe, or the ears, the nose, he's going to tell you what they are right now. But Elohim, what are they? Rosh Etzbos, Yidam Reglaim, the tips of the fingers of your fingers or your toes, Rosh Esnaim, the tips of the ear, Rosh Chotam, the nose, Rosh Ekbiyah, the tip of the penis, of a Rosh Dam Isha, and the tip of the breast, like nipples of a woman. The ears, but even though it's 2 ears, it's counted as one. The same thing with the nipples. In any case, even those of a man, because even sometimes of a man's nipples also protrude a little bit. So he argues about that. But these are those. And they're not metam shumicha for a technical reason because the Kohen can't see since they're on a tip, the Kohen can't see the sides at the same time. He's got to be able to see the whole nega, the whole plague, or whatever you want to call it, the entire plague, and the sides, and he can't see it. Okay, that's what we learned about these things. The Tani Allah. So what does that do with us? What does Nikom have to do with us? Because these things are exposed. That's the idea. All these things, these Rashi Barim have the characteristics that they're exposed and they don't grow back. Right? All these things, which are on one aspect in terms of tzaras, they are not signs of tzaras because the Kohen can't see them all at one time. And the other hand, and the same thing applies that an Eved goes out the cheres because these are all limbs that are exposed and that don't go back. Okay, that's what we learn about. So Rebbe says afasirus. Castration also is something by which that he goes out and he goes out with. In other words, in addition, Rashi says you didn't have to mention those because those are favorites in the pasuk. So we have these 24 that we mentioned. Now there's a 25th sirus. Castration also goes out free. So what Rav Chis was trying to tell Rav Huna is, they asked you, does an Eved go out if he's castrated? Well, Rebbe says yes. Tanakama says no, because the Tanakama didn't mention sirus. Rebbe adds it on. Then Azay Omer, Rebbe says afaloshon, if he cuts off his tongue. If you cut off the Eved's tongue, he would also go out free. Now, is that exposed? That's going to be an issue. We'll talk about that. Okay, Omer Mar, so wait a minute. What does castration mean? Is castration the testicles or the penis? Penis was already mentioned, Roshek Bia, that's one of the 24. Omer Mar, Rebbe Omer Afa, Sirius, even castration. Sirius to my, which kind of castration are we speaking about? This castration can refer to both. Elay, Sirius to get, if we're talking about castrating the penis, Hanukvia, that's already mentioned. That's one of the 24. We mentioned the 10 fingers, the 10 toes. Then we said what? The tips of the ears, the tip of the nose, and the tip of the penis. So we already mentioned that. Elalav Sirius the Basin. In other words, if Rebbe adds on even Sirius, he's adding on something to the Tanakam. Tanakam already mentioned the penis. So therefore, what are we talking about here? It means Sirius the Basin. And therefore, Rav Chisna answered Rav Amnuna, who was posed this question by the Sabi of Nazunya of that place. Is Sirius, does an Eved go out free if he's castrated? Eved can go out free if he's castrated? The answer is it's a machlokas. Rebbe says yes. The Tanakam says no. Ben Azai, we'll see about Ben Azai. Ben Azai says afaloshon, but Ben Azai doesn't really talk about the Sirius, but we'll see if it's cumulative. Ben Azai is cumulative. Let's answer. So his answer was it's a machlokas. It's a machlokas whether Sirius is enough, the castration is enough to free an Eved Knani. Rebbe Omer, afasirus. Let's understand. It's like Omer Mar. Rebbe says Sirius, for Rebbe Lashon Lo. In other words, from the Brisa, it seems like this. There were 24 that were added on to the Shein B'ayin, total of 26. Then Brisa said, okay, the Eved goes out free, all these 26. Rebbe said even castration also causes him to go out. And then Ben Azai said even the cutting off of the tongue. So it sounds like Ben Azai added on even the tongue. Mashma Rebbe didn't hold the tongue. Rebbe Lashon Lo. Rebbe doesn't hold that the Lashon is an exposed organ that doesn't grow back for minu. In this, let's say you had Hazah. What is Hazah for? Hazah is if you became something mace, you get sprinkled by the Mechatas on the third and the seventh day. Let's say you sprinkle, now we'll see later on, it's got to be sprinkled all on the outer part of the body. Let's say Hazah went on his mouth. We'll see like inside the mouth. Rabbi says it's still a good Hazah because he's tummy in there too. No, lo hizah. No, it's not considered a good Hazah because the Hazah has to be totally on the outer part of the body. My love, al-Lashona, when it says on his mouth, don't we mean on his tongue? And since it's got to be on the outside, Rebbe says that's a good Hazah. Mashma, that the tongue, according to Rebbe, is an exposed organ. Now, clearly, as opposed to your ears and your nose and other parts of your body, even unclothed, obviously. You don't say a penis is not exposed because you got your pants on. We're talking about parts of the body that even when a person is undressed are exposed. So the toes are exposed, the hands are exposed, the ears, the nose, etc., etc. What about the tongue? The tongue, it depends. Sometimes you have your mouth open, sometimes it's closed. So how do you consider that? When Ben Azai said afaloshon means because it's exposed. Rebbe apparently he didn't mention lashon, so we assume he holds that it's not considered an exposed organ. But here we see that if you sprinkle, then it went on his mouth. Rebbe says that's a good hazah. That sounds like it's considered exposed according to Rebbe. My love al-lashon, that when he says on piv, says we're talking on his mouth, doesn't mean on the lashon, on his tongue. and Rebbe holds that's considered exposed, and therefore it's a good azah. It's lo asfasa, means on his lips. Doesn't mean that. Asfasa pshita, your lips are exposed. Of course, everybody knows your lips are exposed. Now, Madasem is in the chom, so sometimes your lips are pressed together, and it depends on your lips. Not like these people who put stuff in their lips now to make them look bigger. This guy's Botox, disgusting. Anyway, they normally lips can go either way. They're exposed, but you might think sometimes they're not. The cholim substance means they're pressed together, and therefore they are not considered exposed. Maybe that's why the chacham say that it's not considered exah on the lips. So we're talking about lips kamash malan, that we don't say that. According to Rabbi, they're considered exposed, meaning the lips. You don't mean the tongue. I have a tiny lashon, yeah, but we have another price which says that the machlokas is even by the lashon, even on his tongue. If the azah went on his tongue, according to Rabbi, that's a good azah. So that holds, Rabbi holds it's exposed. Both tiny we learn that one of the mums, a mum of a bechor of an animal, a short kesaves, goes to the kohen, it's brought as a carbon. Let's say it had a mum. You're not allowed to put a mum in there on purpose, but if it had a mum, it's not. It's not part. So what's considered a mum? It's the shenital rav, most of its tongue was taken out. Rabbi Omer, Rav Hamadav. Rabbi says most of the part of the tongue that speaks, meaning from the place where the tongue is attached and going forward, even though an animal doesn't talk normally, in a language that we understand, but he's referring to something, the part of the tongue in which a human being would be the talking part. In other words, the part that's all the way in the back, like the back of your throat, that's not talking about the part that causes you to talk. It's from the part that's attached, from the part where it stops being attached and goes forward. So Rabbi says, that's considered a mum. And if it's considered a mum, it's presumably also means something that's exposed. If it's not exposed, how could it be a blemish? It's not considered a blemish. Is something which you see. It's not there, right? So what do you see? That according to Rebbe, the tongue is considered exposed because he says if the hazal went on the tongue, the second price is al lashona. The first price said piv, so you can say that's the lips. But here he says al lashono, and we also learned that according to Rebbe, if most of the lashon was removed, that's considered a mum. So he considers that obviously a exposed part of exposed limb. Ella Rebbe or Mesiris Philomi Boilosh. Our Mishnah said Mishnah said that the 24 Rosh Avarim, in addition to the Shein V'ayin, total of 26. Then Rebbe said Afa Sirus. Ben Azai added on the Lashon, but Smashma Rebbe doesn't hold the Lashon. No, Rebbe held of Sirus and Lashon. In other words, not only is castrating, according to Rebbe, obviously we'd have how many? 28, because you got the Shein V'ayin plus the 24, that's 26. Then you have Sirus castrating, and certainly if the tongue was cut, that's also considered Rosh Avarim, and the Evet would go out free. So Rebbe says Sirus, but Lomi Boy Lashon. So Ben Azai Amr Lashon, then Ben Azai said Afa Lashon, Aval Sirus Lo, right? So how does it? If you look at the words, right, the lines who go out, Rebbe said not only the 24, the 26, even Sirus too. Ben Azai said even the Lashon. It sounds like Ben Azai is adding on to Rebbe, not only the Sirus, but even the Lashon. Now we're saying that Rebbe has Afasirus means Afasirus, and certainly also Lashon. But I said Lashon Afasirus Lo, not Sirus. So that's what it means. But I said Lashon, only the Lashon, not Sirus Lo. My Af Akamaisa. He's not adding on when Ben Azai, who's the third opinion, says even the Lashon. He's not adding on to Rebbe. He's going Af on the first 24. In other words, you have 24 in addition to Shein Ba'ayin. And Ben Azai says no, also the Lashon. And Rebbe says the Lashon and the Sirus. My af, on the first 24. So if you're giving an order, you're saying, look, the first guy says 24. The second guy says, no, there's an additional one, 25. And then the third guy says, even another one, 26. He should, right, 26. If Ben Azai says really 25 and Rebbe says 26, it should be reversed. You should have the first 24. Ben Azai says, no, there's a 25th, which would be the Lashon. And then Rebbe says no, even the Sirus, which would be 26, it should say that way. Not with an Azab Reisha. He should be the first. And it says Tana Shamal Rebbe. The Tana first heard Rebbe's idea that he said there's two more in addition to the 24, 26. What are they? Lashon and Sirus and castration. Bekava. And he said they put those into the words of Brisa. V'shamal L'Basai. Then he heard Ben Azai Shita, who said in addition to the 24, he only added on Lashon. The Tana he learned that. Umishal doesn't come. In other words, he left Rebbe the way it was. Rashi explains nicely, that you have this idea throughout Shas that he could have said it, but he learned it the original way. Because once you remember something in a certain way, it's hard to change it. Fifth line into the Y lines in Rashi. Once the Chum, they were regular, they had the 24, the basic 24, and then Rebbe added on two more. Rebbe even come, it didn't move. Something that you remember by your mouth. Once you remember something in a certain way, it's hard to change that. So he says, that's why he said, Rebbe added on two more. Then Benazai added only one of those two. So you should have said in theory, if you were organizing, you'd say we got 24 plus the Shem Bayan. Then we have Benazai who says the 25th. Then we have Rebbe who says even a 26th one. That's how you should have said it. But the answer is that he heard Rebbe Shita first, who added on two more. So you had 24. Then Rebbe added on two more, that's 26, and that's how you remembered it. And then, by the way, Benazai said one of those two more adding on. So he left Rebbe as the middle opinion, adding on the two more before Benazai, because that's how they learned the Mishnah and how they learned the Bryce, and he didn't want to mess up their memory. Pardon? Benazai, who's what? The editor, Rebbe, okay, no, this could have been a Bryce. This is not the Mishnah talked about 20, but the Mishnah gone. The Brisa, the Tani Allah, the Kulam Evan, that could be the Brisa that was added on. That was the author, the editor of the Brisas. Rav Achor, Chanina, whoever edited the Brisa, it listed it that way. Amr Ula. So we have this machlokes whether according to Rebbe's opinion, there's actually 28 ways, 28 Rosh Ivarim that an Evan would go out the 24 list of the Mishnah, Shem the Ayin in the Torah, that's 26, and then you also have if you cut his tongue out or castrate him. Amar Ula, Hakamaram Belashon Linyan Tuma, the Goli Eitzel shares. Everybody gets, so the question was that we have this machlokas between Rebbe, you could say Rebbe and Benazai on the one hand, who hold that the Lashon is an exposed organ for which never would go out free, and the Chacham say not. But everybody would agree that the Lashon is considered Tuma the Goli Eitzel shares. In other words, if a sheretz touches your tongue, if a dead sheretz, or 8 sheretzim when they're dead, are matami a person, right? Animals we've said are never matami when they're alive, and most shrotzim are not matami when they're dead. But there are 8 that are. If they touch your tongue, you're tummy. Everybody goes blushing. You tumma the gulu. It's considered exposed. It's just why tumma space is storm. Somebody, if there's tumma on the inside, if somebody dropped something or open up your stomach and put some tumma in there, that's not matami you. It's a tummy only something which is exposed. That's tumma space of storm is not tummy. If there's something inside your body which is tummy, that's not matami. For if let's say you ate something which was lined or covered up with something else, and then it dissolved in your body and it was tummy, you had a piece of tummy in there, that's not matami you inside. Only if it's exposed. So here he says that as far as if a dead sheretz touched your tongue, you'd be tummy. My time, as long as it touches you, behind Nami Barney is capable of being touched. The tongue is capable of being touched. So if some tumah just touched your tongue, you'd be tummy. When it comes to going to the mikveh, immersing yourself in a ritualarium, as they say, right? That's considered tamun, meaning the water doesn't have to touch your tongue. When you go to the mikveh, the water doesn't have to touch your tongue. It's considered something that's hidden, unexposed, right? And therefore, it doesn't have to. My time. What's it? It says it says wash your flesh in water, which is like your basar is on the outside of kol mavroy. So there's no machlokas about that you could become tamei if a tumah like a sheret, that sheretz touch your tongue. There's no machlokas that it's considered hidden, unexposed as far as going to the mikveh. The water doesn't have to touch your mouth. The machlokas is only by sprinkling. If you're sprinkling, which has to be on the outside of the body, and if it went some of it on your tongue, according to Rebbe, that's considered exposed and it's okay. According to Rebbe, not. Rebbe says it's like tumah. It's like tumah. Rabbanan, in other words, just like tumah, it could be you can become tameh if the dead sheretz touch your tongue the same way. Why it's considered exposed? In tumah, it's an exposed part of the body. For us also, Rabbanan can say no. It's comparable to the halacha of tefillah. Just like tefillah, the tongue is considered not exposed; it's hidden. The same way for Azor, it's considered unexposed. But to buy correctly, they both disagree based on this pasuk. Pasuk says by Hazor, when you sprinkle on the 3rd and the 7th day after you became tamei, after you attended a funeral, it says Behiza Tor ala tamei. The Torah person should sprinkle on the tamei person. Rabbi Sarviza Torah Latame, it says Bayom Shishavi Bechito, and then you'll be purified, you'll be cleansed, right? So he compares what? He says Viza Torah Ala Tame, Yom Shishavi Bechito. Rabbanan Sarvi. So what does that mean? Rashi says 5 months from the bottom of the page in Rashi. Rabbi Dorsh Ala Tame Bechito. Anta Bechito. It says Ala Tame Bechito. If you sprinkle on a place which is Tame, and that Makam Tuma is considered cleansing. Chito is like cleaning out, cleansing, purification in our case, spiritual purification. So he says that. Look at the pasuk. Pasuk says, "These are you sprinkle on the place which is tame." Well, the tongue is tame. Our whole body's tame, right? It could become tummy that way. So you sprinkle on a place on a Makam Tuma, and that will purify you. So you could be sprinkled on the tongue too. Rabbanan Sarei says he'll be purified on the 7th day. Bechibas, we got up and wash his clothes, cleanse his clothes. Berochatz b'mayim, and wash him in water. So what does that mean? Wash him in water. The Rabbanan hold b'nechito sheyipol al makam aroy l'rechitza d'anafila, because it says v'chito v'yom shvi v'chibas v'rochatz. So the chito, the sprinkling, has to be like rochatz b'mayim, just like rochatz b'mayim is only on the outside, like tefillah, not on the inside. Therefore, if the sprinkling was on the tongue, that doesn't count. That's not a good sprinkling. So that's the machlokes based on this pasuk. And Rashi, the previous Rashi, in the 6th line from the bottom of the page, Rashi says, "Tefillah lemixas lo mashkan avanegia b'koshu avanegia." This is afkom avroy, meaning everybody agrees that when it comes to tefillah, when it comes to negia, when it comes to a sheretz touching your tongue, your tummy, right? Because any part of your body touched, let's say a kazayas of a mess, or touched a dead sheretz, doesn't have to touch the whole body. Any part of it touched. Negia b'koshu is negia. If it touched it anyway, that's negia. Your tummy. If a dead sheretz touched your hand, your whole body is tummy. But for tefillah, there's no such thing as tefillah mixes. Tefillah means immersion in a mikveh. Tefillah mixes lashkin. Avanegia b'koshu avanegia. So everybody agrees on that in terms of a dead sheretz touching your body. If it touched your tongue, your tummy. Everybody agrees that for tefillah, for immersing your body in a mikveh, the tongue is not considered exposed, and you should keep your mouth closed. The water doesn't have to reach your tongue. However, the machlokes is by hazah. According to Rebbe, hazah on your tongue is okay, because it says as long as you were maz on a place that is tameh. According to Rabbanan, no, hazah has to be like tefillah. Just like tefillah is only on the outer part of the body, not the tongue. The same thing for hazah. Says Gemara, Vesava Rebbe, we're 5 lines from the bottom of the Gemara. No, I skipped the line. Rabbanan, I skipped a few lines, right? We said, what's the Rabbanan's reasoning? The Rabbanan's reason is in other words, the hazah, the chito, has to be like rochatz b'mayim, just like rochatz b'mayim is on the outer part of the body, not the tongue. Same thing for hazah. But this is we're 7 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. Rabbanan nami did ma'alotoma. Why don't the Rabbanan compare it to tumah and say, just like you could be tumah if the sheretz touched your tongue, the hazah should also be just touching your tongue. The answer is Tahara mitara v'lelamel. I'd rather learn out Tahara, hazah, where you're purifying yourself from tefillah, which is also purification. I prefer a lot of Tahara from Tahara and not Tahara from Tumah. For Rebbe Nidmail tefillah, why can't Rebbe compare it to tefillah? Because it says, V'chibas v'garav rachas v'mayim, the V'chibas v'garav hifsek. If we would say V'chito and then rachas v'mayim, you could say, fine, the hazah has to be like the rachas v'mayim. The difference is V'chibas v'garav, that stopped in between, that broke up the continuity of the idea, and therefore hazah is one thing and tefillah is something else. Says the Gemara, the Suffer Rebbe lenient tefillah k'tamidam is Rebbe really hold that your tongue is considered, the same part of your mouth, including the tongue, is considered like hidden and doesn't have to be, the water doesn't have to reach the inside of your mouth when you go to the mikveh. Does Rebbe really? We know that's the case, right? But does Rebbe really hold it? Amar Ravin, Amar Ravada, Amar Yitzchak. Ma'aseh of the story of the Shifra shel Beis Rebbe. There was a story of the Shifra in the house of Rebbe. Shet Tavla went to the mikveh, but also came out of the mikveh. The Nim says Etzem ben Shinah. Now, why was she Matara herself? Well, maybe he had an Eved Ivri who was sleeping with her, or maybe she was a Jewish. She was a Shifra Knanis is like a half Jewish, or just simply she shouldn't be Matamei Taharis over there. They kept everything Matara. So she went to the mikveh. And then when she came out of the mikveh, they found the bone stuck between her teeth. like a chatzitza. Rabbi says remove that bone and go into the mikveh again. Now, if the inside of your mouth, including the tongue, does not need tefillah, the water doesn't have to touch your tongue. What do we care what's inside her mouth, right? What do you care if she had something, like a woman goes to the mikveh today, the mikveh lady checks to make sure that there's nothing, no chatzitza, including in her mouth. All kinds of questions about a temporary filling, right? You have some people who are makbid and they take out the fillings, that's considered chatzitza. The water doesn't have to reach the teeth anyway, or the tongue. So what's the problem? Why does Rebbe, you say Rebbe considers that hidden, but Rebbe said if she had something between her teeth, he said you got to go to the mikveh again, remove it and go to the mikveh again. The answer is nahid to be ismaim lo beinan. You don't need water to go inside the mouth, touching the tongue or the teeth. But makam a roy level of beinam. You need something that's fit. It's fit that water could reach it. In other words, if you had a chatzitza, if you had, let's say, a temporary filling, if you hold that temporary fillings are a chatzitza, something between your teeth that prevented water from reaching it, the water doesn't have to reach your teeth, but it has to be capable of reaching your teeth. You can't have something blocking it. Rav Zera, like the famous rule of Rav Zera when it comes to a korban mincha, there's a rule that the clean the base of Mikdash held 60 saw of flour, let's say, right? 60 saw of flour. Now, not a saw, a tenth. So it holds 60 tenths. But if it held, that's okay. If it had 61, that's not good because it's not capable of being mixed with the oil. But so the question is, what do you mean? But you don't actually have to mix it, even if it doesn't mean. Even if it's not mixed, it's okay. In low ball, it's still kosher. He said, listen, if it's fit to be fixed, to be mixed with the oil properly, then it's not a problem. It's not, then you don't actually have to mix it. But if it's not fit to be mixed, in other words, there's so much flour in there in the vessel that you couldn't mix it with the oil, it's just too thick, then kosher bila, like there's 61, not 60 measures, but 61, then bila makes it bila is ma'akev. It's considered indispensable. You can't do it. In other words, you don't actually have to mix it, but it has to be capable of being mixed. So if you have 60 or less measures of the flour and the oil in there, then it's capable of being mixed properly. If you have 61, it's not capable of being mixed, and that's a problem. It's no good. It's not. You don't actually have to mix it. So the same thing over here. The teeth or the inner part of the mouth. Say you had a piece of gum stuck to your piece of chewing gum stuck to the inner part of your mouth, to your palate. Can you go to the mikveh? No, because the water can't reach your palate. Then it's stuck. You have something stuck to the inside of your mouth, or to your teeth, or your tongue, or whatever, right? Because but the water doesn't actually have to touch it because you keep your mouth closed when you go to the mikveh. It doesn't actually have to do it, but the water has to be capable of reaching those parts. That's what Rebbe says. So Rebbe says that the mouth is considered. The mouth is considered, as far as mikveh goes, the mouth is considered hidden. It's considered hidden. For other things, like for becoming tummy, it's considered exposed. As we said, for sirus, for an evid going out free, if you cut off his tongue, that's considered an exposed. Both Ben Azai and Rebbe both hold it's considered an exposed organ, and therefore an exposed projecting organ, and therefore the evid would go out free according to Rebbe and according to Ben Azai. But actually, this question, whether serous, whether castrating the testicles is considered an exposed organ, and therefore it never would go out free or not exposed. Serous basically is considered an exposed. It's really machlokas tanan. What's the price? The price says the pasuk says umoch of a person. We're talking there about blemishes on an animal, and these blemishes on an animal, if they would take place on an evet kanani, he would go out free. So what are the blemishes in the animal? It says there, it talks about umoch, because if his testicles are bruised. Kosus means crushed. Nutuk means totally severed. Meaning, what do I mean they're severed? They could be hanging in the sac, in the scrotum, but there's like a tube, right, going from the testicles that brings the semen into the body, right, from which it gets ejaculated. So here we're talking about where the first one is if the testicles were bruised or crushed, that's extremely evident. You can see that. Nutuk means where the tube going from I don't know what the medical the testicle term. What's it called?
Seminal vesicles.
The seminal vesicle. Okay, if it's totally severed, that's nutuk. Karus means it's partially cut. Now these are all mumen. These are all blemishes on an animal. Kulam beitzim divra beauty. We're all talking about here of the testicles. Yeah. You can see it from the outside. We're talking about testicles. So they're all talking about the testicles. That's Rabuta. These four blemishes. It says Gemara beitzim v'lo begid. Only if these affected the testicles, and not if the penis itself was bruised or crushed or severed or cut. Certainly that's exposed, right? That's certainly a mum. That's certainly a blemish. Elakulan af beitzim. He means this. Rav Yehuda says, "Akum af beitzim div Rav Yehuda. In other words, Rav Yehuda saying that any of these blemishes, bruised, crushed, cut, or severed, or the order that he gives is severed and then cut, apply both to testicles or the penis. That's what Rav Yehuda says. So that means that he was considered at all, according to Rav Yehuda, it's considered an exposed part of the body, and it never would go out free if the master committed any of those, if he did the damage on any of those ways, whether it's the penis, which is clearly that's one of the 24 Rashi Eivarim, or even if the testicles. Or Belezman ben Yaakov says no, kulam begid. These are only considered blemishes on the penis because anything in the testicles, it's not as exposed, right? You don't see it inside the sac; it's hard to see. It's not so evident. And he says, therefore, it's not an exposed organ, and therefore they were not God free. Rav Yossi differentiates among the four. Rav Yossi says, Malach v'kasas af beitzim. If it's bruised or crushed, then even applies to testicles because you could tell. Not to v'karos, where say it again, Moshe. The seminal vesicle, that tube that goes from the testicles into the body, if it's been severed or partially severed, that only applies not to v'karos, but it only applies to the penis, where it's not. We're not talking about the testicles. If the penis has been severed or cut partially or severed, that's a mum of a beitzim low. Not to v'karos begit and beitzim low. So he makes the difference between the two. But the machlokas clear. Rav Yehuda holds that any castration of the testicles is considered an exposed organ and ever would go out free, and it would be a mum when it comes to an animal. And Reb Lezer says only the penis, not the testicles. Behema gasa. So we talked about a kinyan of an Eved Ivri and an Amavriya. We talked about the kinyan of a Knani. Now we get to animals. Behema gasa, a large animal, nikdas b'masira, is handed over by handing over its reins, the tether. Just hand it over and says, I want to sell you my camel, a large animal. You give me some money, but how is the kinyan? What's the kinyan? What's the symbolic way of acquiring it? By handing over the reins. Badaka, a small animal, lifting. As we'll see, lifting, when you lift it, either a tefach or some say 3 tefachim, is always a kinyan, wherever you are. Even if I go into somebody else's store, he owns the store, and he sells me this item, and we agree to it, and I lift it up, that's my kinyan. I lift it up. Even before I paid for it, I lifted it up. So lifting always works. So he says, a small animal, Divra Meir. Meir says, a small animal must be Agbar. Divra Meir for Reb Lezer. Reb Lezer and Meir both agree that a large animal by handing over the reins, and a small animal a small animal is by pulling it. You can pull the animal, right? Or you hit it with the makal mashicha. As we'll see, mashicha works for both kinds of animals, but it depends where. Hagbal works even in the owner's rishus, even in the seller's rishus. Mashicha and masira work, we'll see, in either where there's no rishus, like in a public area, where you're pulling it, or in a semi-private area. We'll talk about this. Darish Rav Darshan Bikim Chunya. I guess that was the name of a place. He darshan the following thing: not like our Mishnah said. Our Mishnah said a bit large animal Masira, a small one Hagbal, and the Chum say a small one even Mashicha. But Rav Darshan, even a large one, the Mashicha. Ashkenu Shmuel, the Talmid of Rav. Shmuel came upon the Talmidim of Rav Amalu. Miyam Rav Behema Gasnik Mashicha. Is it true that Rav said that? That's not what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah said that a large animal is handed over. Its ownership is transferred via delivery of the tether, of the rope, whatever the reins of the animal. Pulling it, but not the Masir, talking the Masir. Rav not Masir Amar. Rav also, I've heard what Rav said, the Masir just by handing over the reins. Hadar by Meahu. Did Rav retract his opinion? says, yeah, the answer was that so I met the Talmud said, yes, Huda Amrki Aitana. Rav held like the following time, the time of Zu, large or small, Niks Mashicha. A large or small animal can be acquired by pulling it. But Shimon or Zu bought. No, all kinds of animals have to be transferred only by lifting them up. So Moscow of Yosef, they asked according to Shimon, Elameata, Pillar of Shimon Mayikna. How are you going to lift a small animal you could pick up? How are you going to pick up an elephant or a large animal? Amalei, Abai said the Chalipin. You're right. You get the Chalipin works all over. If we said a Chalipin, he can work for an Evikrani by an exchange. Chalipin works for Karka. Chalipin works for Metalpa, and Chalipin is a general kind of a Kenyan. So you can do it with the elephant can be translated inami the sochras makama, or you can rent the spot where it's landing. In other words, I can acquire an animal if he comes into my property. So here, if an animal, here we've got an elephant, I can't pick it up, and maybe he didn't want to do chalipin, he didn't know about chalipin. He says, you know what? I'm renting the spot where the animal is sitting. I'm renting it from you, so it's my area, it's my chatzer. That's the second way. And I'm so maybe Abba Kalim Anichan Tachas Ragla. What you do is you bring 4 kalim of your own, right? 4 little kalim, 4 vessels, and the animal steps on those, and then he's in your rishus. Says the Gemara Shema, because of your kev. Shema mirakev shlokev rishus mocher kanalokev. That's always a question. If it, let's say I have a basket or a bag, and I put that for coming to the store, it's my basket, and we put the stuff in my basket. It's my kli, but it's his store. Do my kalim work to acquire from me in his store? That's a machlokas. What are you saying? Are you saying if the animal steps on your kalim, even though it's in the rishus of the seller, that you're kona? If that's the case, you've proven this case. Kalim shalokech, the vessels of lokech in the rishus of the mocher kona lokech. Is that what you're saying? So now my skin of a simta. No, you're not in the rishus of the mocher at all. You're talking about in a simta. A simta is a semi-private area, a small alleyway off the main street, off the rishus of Rabbim, and there my kalim can acquire from me. So we said, how would you acquire an elephant? One way is chalipin, an exchange, right? I give you my handkerchief, you give, or my pen, whatever, and you give me your or my shoe, whatever it is, and you give me the animal. Or I rent the spot where the animal is, or I cause the animal to go into my kalim. Or I have the animal step on bundles of twigs. Right? I have bundles of twigs which are 3 tefachim. These bundles are 3 tefachim thick, and if I lead the animal on top of that, that's like picking him up. That's like lifting him up. It's like picking him up, and therefore I've lifted him in that way. So that would be the opinion of whom? Of Rav Shimon, who says both the Hagbah. Lamaisa Hagbah works all over. Lamaisa will see that the halach is that large animals and small animals are acquired by pulling them. Pulling them works. If you can lift them, that works for sure. But if it's a large animal, either you have to lift them in one of these ways or by pulling it. We'll see more about this. All right, have a good day, everybody. Kol tu.